Hey there, welcome to Marriage Unmasked. Today we're talking about something that affects a lot of marriages, probably almost every marriage, but it really gets named and called out for what it actually is. So today we're looking at how shame keeps you silent and stuck in your marriage. Shame it's a really deep thing. We're not talking about guilt. We're not talking about conviction. Those things can be healthy at times. But we're really talking about that voice that speaks deeply into your heart and says you're not enough, that you are broken here, that you're too broken to even be loved anymore. And that is a really, really painful voice to be listening to. So what is shame actually? Shame is saying, I am bad. I am wrong. Healthy guilt is like, I've done something wrong, but shame takes it that extra step and makes it part of your identity and says that you are actually bad. You are actually wrong. This has been something I've really struggled with deeply in our marriage. In fact, it was something I struggled with even before our marriage. Was this voice of shame. And I think if we want to really dig down to the depths of it, at least for me, it was drilled into me from a very young age that you're born a sinner. You are a sinner, that is to be with your identity at all times. And that's drilled in and drilled in and drilled in and drilled in. And I understand why to some extent. Like there is value in seeing, where you came from. We lost the image of God and we were sinful at birth, but that's not where we park our identity. And that's what I was doing. I was parking my identity there instead of parking my identity in Christ and what he's done for me, in the forgiveness, in the love, and the fact that my God created me and he knit me together in my mother's womb and I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I was too often equating my identity with I'm a broken sinner instead of where the source of my identity really should be, is from God, that he loves me, he created me, and he went to hell and back on the cross to get me back into relationship with him. And so that is where my identity really needed to be grounded, instead of walking around like I'm a worm. I'm just this rotten sinner.
Yeah, I mean, I think when that's drilled in your head over and over again, whether it's in church or in your home or wherever this like religious messaging is, of like deep in you, you're bad, right? Or this is who you are a sinner, or however it's phrased, right? You internalize that, and that voice of shame separates you from God. And so I mean, for me too, when I was younger, in the like religious setting that I grew up in, I definitely didn't have a relationship with God like I have now. I would call myself a Christian, right? I knew that Jesus died for me. I knew God loved me. I didn't really know that deeply in my core. I knew that in my head.
Yeah.
And I think what was more deeply in my core was you're bad. And this was backed up, yes, it was plenty of religious messaging. Like I remember going to church and saying, like regularly, like like something that you would state as part of like the liturgy was like, I am a miserable sinner. And also there was parts in there about grace. But when you say that kind of stuff over and over again, and then it's backed up by your parents, telling you that was bad, that was wrong, and then separating their love from you, like go to your room, or you are going to be punished, different things like this. It can program, in our brains this messaging of like, yeah, I'm bad. Like I don't deserve love, right? These things can really create shame in our lives. And I think for me, it was a lot sneakier, and God did a lot of healing work in me, so that shame doesn't show up for me as much now. But for Adam, this has been deeply painful in our marriage.
Yeah. And we've talked about that before, like the performance and the people pleasing and all that. We've talked about that numerous times. And that is really, a shame, because then when I do something wrong, perceived as wrong, or when I am not making somebody happy, I'm not getting the result that I want, then there's something wrong with me. Like it goes back to me being the problem. Instead of I made a mistake. That doesn't mean I am the mistake. It just means I made a mistake and I can learn from that mistake. And I had this very deep sense of that I am the mistake. There's something actually wrong with me as a person. And man, this has happened a couple times when we were at like a breaking point, like a really serious breaking point. And I remember walking off. I think I went outside and I just sat down in the grass and I buried my head in my hands. And because I thought I was the problem in the marriage. That's really the deep, deep seat of shame is I am the problem. And so I thought I am the problem. And I literally prayed to God that that he would take me out of it. Like, she deserves somebody who's actually good for her. She needs somebody else, not me. And so I actually was praying for him to take me out of the marriage, take me out of life, because I wasn't good enough. I was literally the problem, and she would be better off without me. And that is such a painful, like, really deep, dark place to be. And obviously, God didn't do that. He cares, He listens to that kind of prayer, but He instead had so much love for me in those moments, even though I didn't necessarily see it because I was in this shame spot and kind of pushing His love away. But I literally wanted to die because I thought that's what our marriage needed.
The enemy uses shame so deeply. None of those thoughts that you are choosing, that you are
Exactly.
the problem and that you shouldn't even be alive or whatever. None of that is from God. That's not His voice. And anytime we can get, and it was probably a very heightened emotional place for you.
Obviously.
But when we can then get to allow ourselves to feel that out, and it's okay,
right,
and ground ourselves again, then you realize like that voice has nothing to do with God.
Yeah.
And so you can recognize it for what it is. We're going to talk about that in a second. Like the first steps to move out of shame, that first one really is like naming it. And so then you can kind of identify it for what it is and realize like this is not from God.
Yeah, and you can have a little bit more power over it then. Instead of being powerless to it, because you name it and you realize, oh my goodness, God doesn't shame me like that. God doesn't think that about me. God isn't here judging everything I do. The devil uses shame to make the voice of his lies so much louder inside of your soul. And so when you name it and you say, hey, this is actually shame, this is actually from the enemy, then you can gain power over it and recognize it for what it is and separate yourself from it. Like, no, that's not me. That's not my identity. God has so much more for me than that.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that you are choosing shame over and over, which was seeming to happen in our marriage before Adam started healing, doing the healing work, it was happening all the time. Like every time we would have any kind of little disagreement, even Adam would immediately start to go to, even verbally, and I'm sure he was in his head doing it way more than he was even expressing to me, but he would express to me like, it's all my fault. I'm the problem. And it was like every time. So it was then getting really frustrating for me because I'm like, I felt like I couldn't express anything without him going into this huge shame spiral.
It really defeats the whole purpose of the conversation. Like it really put the brakes on any kind of growth.
Yeah.
Because it's like the extreme version of the victim mindset. There's no power in that whatsoever. The enemy had me in this grip and thoughts I was choosing. Like I can take responsibility for it.
But it makes sense that these thoughts are coming up for you because this is literally programmed in your brain from young on. This deep, deep pressure to be a good boy, to be nice, to be right, to do all the right things. And so this messaging in your head is just like, you must not be doing good enough or this wouldn't be happening. We want to talk about really how this is affecting your marriage. And, two common reactions to shame are like withdrawal, shutdown. It's like that freeze response, that nervous system response where it's like, okay, this is unsafe. I'm going to withdraw. I'm going to shut down, right? Or the other one is this fight response, stress response, where it's like, I got to defend myself or I'm going to attack them, right? Like, and that is probably the one I've done more is like go on the attack, feel the need to defend myself, which makes so much sense with the way I grew up and the trauma and the wounds I experienced. And
I did both. I mean, really honestly, I would go to both because to feel better about yourself, you often will blame and attack and go on the offensive. all in an attempt to kind of create this shell around your heart and to feel better about yourself. And that's just shame showing up in a different format. Or I would go into like I mentioned before, that deep shame spiral where it's like I'm the problem and it would be better if I'm not even here.
Yeah. I mean, often I think what we're seeing in couples is the husband often goes to like defense. His wife brings something up, he gets defensive or he shuts down, right? That's why I created my masterclass to communicate your needs to your husband without him getting defensive or shutting down. But wives often, they tend to over explain. They tend to get critical, right? When they're, reacting. And so, of course, we're not saying that you're bad or anything like that for reacting. These are a stress response reaction, right? And we're just creating awareness around it. We just want you to be aware, oh, like I noticed this is something that I do. Why this all matters so much is because shame really isolates you, right? Shame isolates it. And so in a marriage, it's going to isolate. That connection is going to be lost. And we don't want that for you. We want you to be connected to your spouse, but even more than that, we want you to be connected to God. And shame also isolates from God.
Yeah.
And so we want you to enjoy that connection, that love in both your marriage and your relationship with God.
And this shows up really strongly in the Bible, in like the first stories of the Bible, when we're talking about Adam and Eve and the fall into sin, and how shame showed up there is really informative of how shame continues to show up. They realized that they had done something wrong, and so their first instinct is to isolate from God, to hide. When He's calling them in the garden, they are hiding. They are running away from Him. They want nothing to do with Him because they feel so terrible about themselves. And then as soon as He calls them out and gets them into the open, then they start to blame and they start to attack each other to try to deflect that shame that they feel over what they've done. They blame and they attack each other, or they attack the serpent, and they shift blame everywhere. And so that's very instructive for how it still shows up in marriage today and in life. Is there's hiding, or there's the blame and the attack and the criticism that happens.
But I think what's so powerful about that story is that they disobeyed God. He said, "Don't eat from this tree." They ate from it, and then what did God do? Did He immediately say, "Okay, I don't want to have anything to do with you"? No, He actually pursued them. He pursued them, right?
Calling out to them.
He was going for connection and relationship with them, and the same thing is true for us, right? God does not. Oh, He's just counting up all the things that you're doing that are unhealthy or unhelpful. And He's just ready to, punish and, keep a record of all these wrongs of yours. And He doesn't want to have anything to do with you because you are just too far gone. That's not anything true about God. He comes for you. He fights for you. He wants that relationship so much. And I think that's one of the beautiful things to really learn about that story.
Right, and he gave it all to get us back. I mean, you think about it, really, we get so caught up in like the rules, what we should do or not do, but the whole point of the Bible is Him pursuing us again, Him loving us and going to the uttermost degree to love us, to actually become one of us, to actually live the life we couldn't, and to die the death we deserved, and to come back from the dead again in power so that we could experience the same thing. I mean, he went all the way for us. And so it is this story of love, and so often we twist it into this do and don't and judgment and rules, and really the whole point is His love and His pursuit of us.
Yeah. So how shame keeps you stuck in your marriage is like when, it often can show up like you feel like your needs are too much, right? I know this is how I've recognized like shame thoughts in my own head is I will tell myself, yeah, you're too much for him. Like obviously he can't even be in a conversation with you. Like you're too much. Just keep your mouth shut. You need to just not express what you need, and then I will just stop sharing, right?
Yeah, and that's a sad consequence of it, because it's like my shame actually inspires some shame, and so like shame can trigger shame in the spouse, and that's really sad too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or like you think you're the problem, which I know you've expressed. So you take responsibility for everything. And Adam
Yes,
definitely did that,
I
where
did.
it was like he's taking over responsibility.
Yes,
Like this is
yes.
not his fault,
And
right? Like
this often happens when a husband really puts his wife on a pedestal, you know. And there's a sneaky two-sided thing. We could do a whole like podcast episode on that, on how that can just
yeah.
destroy things in your marriage. But in the area of shame, you put your wife on a pedestal, then you tend to focus on I have to be the problem because she's great, I'm not, and so you're constantly like shaming yourself about what you're doing wrong, and you're taking on this massive burden of I am the whole problem here, and that's never the case. That's not really true.
Yeah, no.
There's always two sides to it, and there's always growth that needs to be happening on both sides.
Yeah, and wives, I know wives in my restored community have shared that they have felt that as well. So it's not just a husband thing, but that's
Yeah,
also
no,
something that a lot of wives feel too. And another way is like if you feel like a failure, right? So you avoid anything that might confirm that you are a failure. I mean, the thing is, our body doesn't want to experience pain. And so if something is feeling painful, if there's a painful story, we're going to do everything we can to avoid it. You know, I'm working with a wife right now whose husband has left the marriage because he is in such deep shame, and he would rather pursue this a new relationship with another woman than, and his wife is open to him and she's open to restoring this, but he would rather pursue this new relationship because it is so painful to be reminded of the fact that he's a failure in his head. I'm not saying he's a failure, but
right.
in his head it's his fault. He's in such shame about it that he doesn't want to have anything to do with their marriage.
Yeah, and this is another reason why a lot of times in conflict or in difficult conversations, I was always tempted to completely like abandon the situation, to like check out, to leave, because I didn't want to feel the feelings. I didn't want to face the pain of the shame. Whereas, growth is really being bold and staying in that pain, being comfortable to some extent, being uncomfortable, and to experience the pain of the shame and to work through it with your spouse instead of just I'm going to go off, because that shame that isolates, and when you are isolated, you can't heal that. No, I'm not saying you can't take a break. Like there's need for a break sometimes to calm down, to cool off, to like get your head on straight. But if you're just taking a break just to avoid and to just let the shame spiral just go crazy, that's not gonna bring about any kind of connection. That's unhealthy, and you're not going to be able to resolve things then.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And sometimes, you don't have language for your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just stay shut down. You just go to, this shutdown place, or you get defensive. And that's okay if you didn't even recognize that you were feeling shame, that you were experiencing that. And now you're kind of realizing, okay, wow, this is actually what's been going on inside my heart. That's okay. It's okay if you sometimes don't have words in the moment either.
Yeah.
But just recognize that what you want to do is sit with it, maybe open your heart up and talk about that you don't know the words, rather than just shutting down or getting defensive. So shame says, don't say it, don't show it, don't need anything, or they'll reject you. That's really the voice of shame. Anytime that those are the thoughts in your brain, you can recognize that's shame again, right? That's shame talking. And I don't have to accept that thought. I don't have to believe that about myself.
Absolutely. And so we want to talk about how do you start to get into a place where you can heal your heart from the shame and step into some new thoughts about yourself and help your heart to heal. And healing really starts with the truth. Like we've been talking about shame, this loud voice that's constantly speaking lies inside of your head. Healing it really starts with the truth getting louder than the lies. And so you go to passages like Romans 8:1, where God says there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. That's huge. You don't have to partner with condemnation. You partner with God's truth that Jesus loves you and that you are accepted and that you are loved and that you are cared about by God.
I really love the passage from Psalm 34, verse 5, where it says, "Their faces are radiant." I mean, when you're in pain, in your marriage, your face is definitely not radiant, right? And a lot of times there's shame there. But this passage says their faces are radiant, never covered in shame, because that's just not what God wants for us. And so one of the first steps out of shame, like I said earlier, is to name it, because you can't heal what you don't. If you're hiding these things, if you don't understand what's going on, and you don't call it out for what it is, then it's not going to get healed. And so shame loses its power when you're connecting safely with your spouse, when you're connecting safely with God. So when you're doing that first step of naming it, you can talk to God about it, right? You can bring it to God. And, maybe one example is like, to recognize when I think I'm a failure or when I think I'm the problem, I tend to what? Kind of just identify what that looks like for you when you're thinking that thought of like, I'm the problem, or I'm a failure. And the second one is to bring it to God, because again, shame loses its power when you are with God and you're talking to God about it. You get to hear what He says about you.
Yeah.
Ask Him what He says about you, and He talks about it plenty in His Word too, in the Bible.
Yeah.
He talks about what a precious gift you are, what a masterpiece you are, and how perfectly loved you are, which we've already said today.
And this is another area where you can use your imagination, and it's like a powerful use of your imagination. I know something that has helped me heal from shame, especially when I'm starting to spiral and whatnot, is to actually just imagine Jesus in front of you and imagine Him looking at you and imagine Him embracing you, because that's what He's actually doing. He's with you, and He wants to show you His love and His acceptance of you, and that He honors you, and to even just to imagine that he's calling you His honored son or His honored daughter, and his beloved, maybe, to actually hear that from Him and imagine that truth in more of an experiential way. It can be very powerful to just close your eyes and just to actually imagine that reality. There is healing in that, when you're able to open up to that truth.
Mm-hmm. And then the third step is to create safety together. So with your spouse, these first two steps were kind of by yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of this healing you do by yourself, with shame. Like you don't need to maybe talk through everything with your spouse. But this third step is where you start to create that safety together. Especially if one spouse is struggling with shame more than the other, it's just asking that hurting spouse, like, how can I make it safer for you to be honest with me? Because shame hides, right? Shame hides. And so to draw that back into the light, take it out of the darkness, right? Don't keep that locked in. But we want to bring that to the light. And so to just ask and get curious about, like, how can I create that safety for you to be open and honest? That's a powerful step. And then the last one is just speaking life over yourself and your spouse. And this has really helped me over the years. Back when I was struggling with a lot of shame, I learned to just speak life over myself, to speak these truths. And I mean, I would have sticky notes all over the place, and I was reading all these things, but that
still do. She has sticky notes all over her office.
Yeah. I'm looking at one right now that says, "You are so loved," and that was written by my daughter. So just, and just treasuring those things. Sometimes our brain looks for the negative things, and then it holds on so tightly to those negative things. But the truth is so beautiful. And so we want to really make that the thing that is evident overall, and just keep speaking that, and speaking not just over yourself, but over your spouse. And that's something that I in the whole journey with Adam and the shame, I really had to take ownership for my part in that too, where I was speaking so much criticism over him, and I needed to speak so much more life over him as well. And so I don't need to shame myself for that either, but
It is when you can reset the atmosphere where you're both speaking life, and you just, that is the habit and the atmosphere of your marriage. That is incredibly powerful, and it's incredibly healing for things that you're struggling with. Like, the more life you can speak in your marriage over yourself, like speak life over yourself and speak life over your spouse, and remember that God is always speaking life over you. That just creates an atmosphere where shame cannot thrive.
Yeah. So I know this was a big topic, and we invite your thoughts, your questions, your comments. We would love for you to share this because shame is running rampant. I mean, like we said before, it's affecting every marriage at some point, and it kills the connection, it kills the intimacy with God and you and with your spouse. And so this is a really, really powerful topic. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and we just really pray that this spoke to you deeply,
Yeah.
and just brought so much life into you and your marriage.